Newsflash, asshole! I've been here
Glitchtrap.
the entire goddamn time! Then why would you say something? Because I hate you!
Hello everybody! Welcome to my channel. Do you like my new OC representative character? I'm not trans, I just can't do long hair without making it look feminine, so I leaned in, but she's a beaut, right? I'm a beaut, really, is what I'm saying. Today's video is a bit of a silly one, bit of a goofy one. I'm gonna... Oh, I made it myself, by the way. This wasn't commissioned, this wasn't taken off the internet, obviously. I made this myself. And she has 3 expressions. Well, she has 3 poses and 2 expressions, really. And it's an expression to pose. She'll get more expressions and things as we go down the line. I'll probably make her look a bit more animatronic-y if she doesn't already. Anyway. Onto the theory. And this theory is the one that I foreshadowed at the end of my 3.5 hour epic on Help Wanted 2 Steel Wool era games. I could probably separate that out a bit more. Also, probably after this, I've got a timeline. I'm going to do a timeline, but that might take a while to do. So until then, I might break down theories into smaller, more manageable explanations. There was a comment the representative suggested I do that, so I probably will. But today I'm going to look at things from another perspective. When it comes to Glitchtrap, I'll play the clip.
Some kind, like step-up transformers and electricity. You know how it is. That's everything. What? Oh. Ah, right, yes. The It's Me Easter egg. Right, well, I mean, I guess the It's Me Easter egg could just mean that, like, Crying Child's soul is here and help wanted. I mean, technically he never gets put to rest. I think we can all agree it's the 5 missing children who were put to rest. It wouldn't make sense. It just wouldn't make sense for 4 missing children to be put to rest and Crying Child and Shadow Freddy, and I guess maybe, I mean, Golden Freddy probably gets turned to Lefty, but I guess Glitchtrap is crying and drooling like how a child would cry, and very visceral and human, as I mentioned earlier. Probably not the mimic, but I guess not really how you'd expect an adult to cry either. And then, I guess, Crying Child was working with William, and I guess his adult counterpart could be the CEO, and then the It's Me Easter egg, and then 83. No. No, it's... And then he would have been possessing the nightmares, which would include Plushtrap. No. It's not possible. No.
So yeah, that's what I'm covering today. The chance that Crying Child is Glitchtrap, and specifically that Crying Child is more likely to be Glitchtrap than the Mimic, which I guess we'll get to. Into my sarcastic, I believe this pose I labelled as OC Grumble. So I'm just going to keep her in this pose the entire Mimic explanation. But effectively, Edwin Murray has a son called David. David makes the Mimic for David, and it copies David's actions so he can play with him. He doesn't hire a babysitter to watch over his house for some reason, so he goes out to work. David goes outside, he gets run over, and then he sees the Mimic mimicking David. He beats Mimic, that infuses it with agony, according to Right Host. I don't know if that's said in the book or if that's just like a theory, but anyway, he beats it up, he teaches it violence. Group of Phasma people come to get it, it kills them. They made a line of mimics at some point. The first ones it killed through the whole, take the heads, take off the limbs, put them into piles of anything humanoid, and then it did that to humans. Whoopsie! And then it just ripped apart the others, I guess, because who cares about keeping a character consistent? Am I right? Yeah, and then it's in the Storyteller Mimic 1. I haven't actually read the stories, and I don't intend to. I shouldn't have to understand the Mimic's backstory. Like, if that is the Mimic's backstory, that it's objectively bad storytelling to make it so that the people going for the mainline stuff don't understand the Mimic's backstory. And it would have been so easy to fix, by the way, because they could have just, they could have given us death minigames in Ruin that, showed, with the Atari-style graphics that showed off the Mimic's backstory. Even if it was just backstory from the books, it would have been that easy, and then we'd have known what the Mimic is, then everyone would be happy, and sure, it would ruin the twist, or just, you can, sure, it would ruin the twist, but we already knew it was coming anyway, or have or have the story be at the end of every chapter, or have it be like a new game plus, where you can play through the death mini games, and, when you die in the new game plus, after you've already seen the Mimic, so you can get its backstory. Or something. Anything. But whatever, I guess. Why make it so you understand the new antagonist in the games? You could just make him pro reader. But in case you can't tell, I don't like the Mimic. It's not a bad concept, but I don't think it would work in FNAF, for one. Which is already off to a bad start. But two, it doesn't... It won't... It's just a watered down Afton. They take an interesting concept and they just don't do anything with it, and anyway, it gets springlocked in the end in a jester costume. And there's Mimic 1 in there somewhere. In Tiger Rock, that's the Mimic for you. That's the Mimic. And you don't need a better explanation, because who cares? Okay, so what I'm going to do is break down the supernatural explanation, which isn't going to use any specific William-based evidence, or crime chart-based evidence, but instead I will go for a more generic, human soul evidence, and evidence of the Mimic. The evidence that it's the Mimic divides down to 5 or 6 evidence points. There's the big one, which is that it mimics, that it uses Tape Girl's voice, a distorted version of Tape Girl's voice, but if you undistort it, it's Tape Girl's voice lines. So that's a pretty big one. That's the strongest piece of evidence. Not too bad. There's the Baobab Tree and Princess Quest, which is, at best, good supporting evidence, but something that you can kind of write off. It doesn't really matter, but that's fine. There's just the fact that Mimic 1 is in control of the Pizzaplex in the books, and Glitchtrap's in the Pizzaplex in the games. Though, again, books are always kind of a parallel to, not always, not necessarily guaranteed. The Mimic being burnt out, which is a whole other theory that I could disprove, and will. Yeah, then there's the final Glitchtrap level, which uses recreated assets, and, that's uses recreated assets, recreates one of William's crimes, that's the theory. And then the general theory goes that, the Mimic was uploaded into the machine from old software, and then, which, it's fine. Okay, first off, that's the Mimic, right? That's the Mimic theory. I'm probably missing 1 or 2 pieces of evidence, but that's the general gist of it. The gist of it is then that it mimicked Tape Girl's voice to create the tapes, and then that it, learned William's crimes from Help Wanted. Even though William's crime is only in Help Wanted in that final level, which some Mimic theorists say is supposedly created by the Mimic, but I guess it doesn't have to be created by the Mimic. You could just say that, that it was just in the game, and that's where the Mimic learned it from. You could also just say the Mimic learned to kill from Help Wanted. I don't think it necessarily needs to be Afton it's copying specifically. There's a whole lot of things that don't. I feel like I need to pull apart the Mimic theory so that I can convince you that it is something supernatural, and then that I can convince you that it's Crying Child, right? So, And I don't fully believe it's crying child, but I just think it's worth pointing out. So, pulling apart these pieces of evidence, as I said, the baobab tree is kind of a take it or leave it piece of it. Like, it's not. In my opinion, if you've got tiers of evidence, you've got like tier 1. That's the best. That's something in the games, completely canon, that requires an explanation. And like, if you can explain that with your theory, then not only does it provide evidence to, but it also explains something. And that's good. And that's what the talking in Tape Girl's voice in the layer when Glitchtrap's going, all its weird distorted noises, right? So like that's tier 1 evidence. That's pretty damn good. Tier 2 evidence is then it's in the games, it's canon, it's compelling, but it doesn't need an explanation. So that would probably be like the final level of help wanted, right? And then you've got tier 3, it's in the books, it's a parallel, but it's still pretty compelling. That would be the mimic in the books, controlling the Pizzaplex. And then you'd have tier 4, which is kind of like it's excess, it's the Baobab Tree and Princess Quest. It's like, oh, this doesn't really matter. And then you've got, but like it is there and it does link. And then you've got tier 5, which is more like it's an idea. And like it supports the theory and it's not a bad idea, but it's not canon, it's not anywhere. It's just like, oh, this idea could work. And that's kind of when you put theories on theories. So like Mimic being Burn Trap supports Mimic being Glitchtrap. But like, because we don't know that that's canon, it's not great evidence. Whereas in, like, if it was canon, it would basically be tier 1 evidence. That would basically be theory confirmed. So going through the tiers, like, tier 4 evidence, like the Baobab Tree, you can just kind of wipe off, right? And tier 5 evidence is also, like, depends on if you believe or don't believe the theory, so you can also kind of wipe that off. Tier 3 evidence, then, is also something you can kind of wipe off. Like, you can kind of go, like, well, if the evidence in the games doesn't support that, then it doesn't. So, you've got tier 1, tier 2, which are the ones you can't wipe off, right? With tier 1 being, like, if you're coming up with an alternative theory, you need to explain this just as well, if not better. So, does the supernatural explanation fit the criteria? Well, yes. Because Mimic doesn't have that much evidence supporting it. Like, if you can explain why Glitchtrap is speaking in Tape Girl's voice, like, distorted, in the supernatural explanation, you've basically made it just as likely as the Mimic explanation, if we're honest. Especially because, like, in terms of tier 3 evidence, like, in the books, like, Fazbear Frights is making it pretty clear, like, oh, William is Glitchtrap, William can possess people, William can inject people with his agony, and, like, William can do all this. You got In the Flesh, which I know is, like, the one that everyone makes fun of for being Emperor. If it was described as a parasite, people have no problem with it, but whatever, I guess. But, like, it does show, like, Springtrap in game coming into real world. Like, it gives the idea, like, even describing it as a pregnancy makes Glitchtrap feel human. So, like, even Fazbear Frights, I would say, is just as compelling evidence as Tales from the Pizzaplex for, like, to support either. But I guess you could argue Tales from the Pizzaplex is newer, so that would be why you would maybe give it precedent over, right? Now, in terms of Tape Girl speaking through Glitchtrap, I don't think there's, like, an explanation that's as good as Mimic, but there are some decent explanations that you can come up with, Like, for example, it is likely, like, in the supernatural explanation, the explanation for the tapes is that he just possesses her body and records them, which does make more sense because Help Wanted itself doesn't have any kind of voice recording software, right? So it's likely that Tape Girl had to take that from an external software, record her voice, and then put it into the game manually. And so in theory, Mimic shouldn't be able to create those, right? Theoretically. Even if he can mimic voices as Glitchtrap, he should only be able to do that if he has a speaker around. He shouldn't be able to do that in-game. Whereas if Glitchtrap is just possessing her, then that's a lot easier. And then with the supernatural explanation, it's just, well, it's likely that she would have suffered the body swap ending, or maybe the princess ending. Like, she'd be locked in the game, so of course Glitchtrap would be able to use a distorted version of her voice. Like, but in some endings, she might just be inside of Glitchtrap, body swapped, but like with her soul just trapped inside of Glitchtrap. Or it could be a case of Glitchtrap's taken over her body, so her soul is kind of like his and he can speak with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, sure, the explanations aren't great, but you can explain it, right? Like, there's an explanation there for certain. So it's not something that, like, only points towards Mimic. It's something that does point towards Mimic, and the Mimic explanation is the easiest, but, like, you can explain it in the supernatural explanation, so it's not theory breaking. And it's Mimic's only major piece of evidence, if we're being honest. And so, now if we go, but then also the supernatural explanation has also I would argue, more tier 1 evidence. For example, there's the tier 1 evidence. Okay, Mimic, no, Glitchtrap is described as Tape Girl. There's two things. One, really looking, not like Chica or Bonnie would, which is pretty massive, because, like, I would argue that's a major counterpoint to the Mimic theory, because the Mimic is specifically supposed to look like, it is specifically not human. It does not have the ability to really look, it just carries out instructions, right? That's the thing about the concept of the Mimic that I really like. Oh, it carries out murders like they're chores. It doesn't know any better. It's monkey see, monkey do. Like, it's not malicious, it's not evil, it's not any form of sentient. But that also means it wouldn't be able to look, it wouldn't be able to think, it wouldn't be able to plan, it doesn't have wants, it doesn't have desires. It's purely going for monkey see, monkey do. Even if we say it's seen William's crimes, Mimic 1, which isn't really even in, like, there's some things you have to shuffle around to make it work, for sure. Like, even if you say that that's happened, like, it would never be looking. It would be just like Chica or Bonnie. That's the point of the concept. So already that's a major point in theory of it's human, it's supernatural. And the second major point is even bigger, because it is specifically noted that, like, once Glitchtrap attaches itself to her files, which, like, already very weird to do. Like, I don't know if that's something a computer program would ever be able to actually do, attaching itself to other files, which already feels supernatural. But then the big thing is that, like, she can't delete the files once it's done that. Once it fuses itself to her files, it can't be deleted. Which implies that just Glitchtrap itself can't be deleted. Which is pretty wild. And not something that you'd be seeing from the Mimic. Like, the Mimic is never noted as not being able to be deleted. It's just a bunch of programs. It should, by all accounts, be perfectly possible to delete it. So if you can't delete the Glitchtrap, that's because it's probably supernatural in nature. It is a ghost, it is a soul, you cannot delete it. Right? Like, that. And that's not something that has an explanation in the Mimic theory. That, or the idea that it's looking like an actual human as opposed to Chica or Bonnie would, right? Like, those two things, major pieces of evidence that this is a soul, and not anything else. And then you get into the whole burn trap, glitch trap fiasco, which, like, if you look at this, like, you can see, when Bone Trap touches the monitor, he's able to cause Freddy to go haywire. He's able to power up Glitchtrap, and Glitchtrap possesses Freddy, and his eyes go purple. You know. And, like, obviously there's Glitchtrap association with purple and all of that, which, like, really just furthers it, because Mimic 1, like, when Glitchtrap possesses something, their eyes go purple. When Mimic possesses Helpy, or Mimic 1 takes over Helpy in some way, influences him, shows its true colours, whatever, its eyes go yellow. Which is never something that Glitchtrap's been associated with. Like, making eyes go yellow, it's always been purple. Anyway, point is, Burntrap can power up Glitchtrap, not through proximity, not through some kind of antenna, not through anything that would make sense for the Mimic, which wouldn't even really make sense because, to my knowledge, in the books, like Mimic 1 is downloaded into Mimic, or they're like in Ruin, they're clearly two very different entities, like almost separate of each other, both trying to mimic different behaviors, but both on the same side, both to the same goal. And suddenly you've got like Burntrap can put a hand on a monitor and like you give him strength, give him power, which does not make sense to be like that's not something the Mimic could do. That's very supernatural in nature. This connection between them and the way he goes about using it. So that would also then, like, I also just don't think Burntrap can be Mimic because, that Mimic was said to be locked in the basement for a long time. J-Top has gone on record to say it's a very old machine. And so, like both Gregory and outside sources, J-Top, have confirmed that, like, yeah, the Mimic was down there for a long time. It's an old machine, so it wasn't created by Vanessa, wasn't created by Vanny, wasn't created by Gregory, or GGY, or, Dr. Rabbit. It wasn't created by anyone like that. It was created a long time ago, and the Mimic is said to have been down there a long time. Like, that is almost certainly means that the Mimic was locked down there during the events of Security Breach, and we see Burntrap. Which just means that, frankly, Burntrap isn't the Mimic. And he's got flesh on him, which the Mimic doesn't. The Mimic, like in my opinion, the theory that Burntrap is the Mimic was spawned out of the books because it had rabbit ears. That was it. And it was compelling, there were some good points. Like the whole, like, the arms cropped and Glitchtrap, like, no he doesn't. Glitchtrap just has arms that he occasionally has to hang by his sides. He's not doing the David pose of the plushie to his. He's not. He just isn't. But like that was compelling in my opinion until Ruin came out. Well, it wasn't even. It was never compelling to me, but like it was. It was a theory you could argue for until Ruin came out, and in my opinion, Ruin candidly. And like we see the Blob, so we know that Burntrap and the Blob are probably real. Like they exist even if that ending didn't happen. That's what the Blob being there is telling us. Which also means Glamrock Mr. Hippo exists, so everybody get hype. But like, just Mimic is not Burntrap, which means Burntrap powering up Glitchtrap, not only in a way that's already supernatural, but like. Like there's a million things they could have done to tell us that Burntrap was the Mimic. They could have had bunny ears on the floor. They could have had, the outer casing on the floor. They could have had flesh or teeth on the floor. They just didn't. And like, there's not a single part of their designs that is similar or like the same. There's one part that's similar, but like both their hands end in like one of the Mimic's hands ends in spikes. But even that is very different design wise. Like people have actually tried to tell me that these things like have the same foot or like they or the same hand. It's like they don't. Just look at them. Like not just in terms of color either. Like actual shape and design are different. There's not a single design similarity except for the fact that they're vaguely humanoid, which is true of every animatronic. Point is, these things just aren't the same. Okay, he is Drew, he is Danny, and they are not the same person. Although Mimic's trying to be. And it's likely that the reason we see the Blob escaping is because it's picked up Burntrap. And, whatever you want to say Burntrap is, it's not Mimic. And it powers up Glitchtrap, so clearly it and Glitchtrap are the same thing. And if you really want to use evidence that, like, I don't feel like you should use, but you can, you've got the FNAF Character Encyclopedia has an entry that goes like, it's whatever the remains of Scraptrap, powered by whatever was inside a Springtrap that appears to have lived on in the form of Glitchtrap, or something like that. Or like, the remains of Scraptrap, powered by whatever was inside of Spring Bonnie, that appears to have lived on in the form of Glitchtrap, something like that. And while most people agree that that book is not necessarily to be taken as canon, if you do, that's pretty clear evidence that they just, like, the Burn Trap is Springtrap. And then also in the emails in FNAF AR, which I personally don't... Like, this was one of the scrapped ones, so I don't personally feel you should use it as evidence, but a lot of theorists do, so I'll mention it here, that it's specifically noted that Vanessa is, like, voices are coming out of the computer that not just Vanessa is hearing, but, like, anyone around her can hear. Like, it is speaking through the computer. Which, like, you can explain for Mimic, but, like, it feels supernatural in nature. So, yeah, Glitchtrap, probably supernatural. And if you want to go, like, and then you have things like the tears and the drool on the mouth and eyes, which, you know, are noted as being... What am I saying? The drool and tears on Glitchtrap feel very humanoid, right? Like, that's like a child crying, you could say, right? It feels like a fundamentally human emotional cry. It does have connections to Mimic, and, like, but only if you stretch it. Like, in the book, Edwin is said to have tears and you're foaming at the mouth, and he's got tears coming out of his eyes as he beats up the Mimic, but it's like, the physical Mimic and Mimic 1 aren't the same thing, so why would Glitchtrap suddenly... And if you are someone who believes the books are in continuity, then you just don't believe Glitchtrap is Burn Trap because it doesn't line... Glitchtrap is Mimic because it doesn't line up. But the books definitely aren't in continuity, like, they really probably aren't, but, you know... If you believe they are, then I just don't think you can believe Glitchtrap is the Mimic, because the stories just don't line up, right? So, yeah. Mimic, not Glitchtrap. Definitely not. You know who the Mimic might be? God, this is almost half an hour long. I haven't even got to the actual theory. Fuck. Okay. Speedrun. You know who the Mimic might be? Psychic friend Fredbear. Okay, it's not too much evidence. It's more of a hypothesis. It's more of just a gut instinct. But, like, we know William likes to... I don't want to rely on too many theories here, but, like, it's... William, to me, feels like he built the Mimic, because we're seeing its machine near Fredbear's family diner, connected, or, like, under the FNAF 6 location, which is probably Fredbear's family diner, connected to the sister location bunker. It's purple. It's like, it's got rabbits everywhere, and if you look at it in the AR world, it is purple, and it isn't Glitchtrap. So in my opinion, it kind of has to have been built by Afton. Like, if you have any, like, you know, people have commented, like, many theorists have said, like, oh, Steel will know how to tell stories visually. If you're making it purple, and you're making Mexis the rabbit, then it is, made by Afton, right? Or you have to come up with another explanation for why it is specifically a rabbit. The only other explanation I can come up with is that maybe Glitchtrap... It seems likely to me that Glitchtrap was uploaded into the Pizzaplex through Mexis, so maybe that had something to do with it, but to me it feels like likely that this machine was made by William Afton, right? And, like, especially because Funtime Foxy just straight up has a mimicking voice box. Like, it has a parent Mimic voice box, so the Mimic is... Yeah, like... And also, like, the Mimic is said to be able to bend and grow into any costume, just like a Funtime endoskeleton, right? And, like, we don't know if that carries over into the games, but the Glamrock endos are definitely, like, almost certainly Mimics, because that we see them being taught that way, right? And it seems like any casing can be thrown on a Glamrock endo, despite the fact that, like, Foxy, Roxy, Montgomery, and Freddy... Chica, Roxy, Montgomery, and Freddy are very different. Like, you know, the male to female animatronics, it's not even just like the male animatronics are slightly more square. It's like, no, they are a completely different build, a different size, they're much broader. And yet, supposedly the Glamrock endos can fit both of these suits. Like, already that's evidence that they can in some way manipulate themselves to fit any costume. But then you have... also, just the fact that Mimic is locked in Fredbear's family diner is very interesting, and gives the Mimic a connection to Fredbear, which gives it a connection to Crying Child. And so already Mimic's got a connection to Crying Child right there, but, you know, also if you notice when when old Gregory goes into Freddy, Glamrock Freddy, you'll notice that like he's got the stomach catch, and the animatronic, like the endoskeleton, appears to have like moved itself around the stomach hatch, and Vanessa claims like, "Oh, we'll just throw your casing on another endo." So it's like the endo must. This implies that any old Glamrock endo can fit any old character, except for DJ Music Man, but we know he's seemingly from a different company or maybe a different branch of Fazbear Entertainment. Like, there's a thank you for purchasing message, so it doesn't seem like Fazbear Entertainment made him, or at least not like the Pizzaplex made him. They might have other branches. Like, it's potentially possible that Afton Robotics is still going on. If Music Man is from Chica's, from Baby's original place. Anyway, point is, if the Glamrocks can just manipulate them, like if the Glamrock endos can just manipulate themselves to fit around Freddy's, to fit the different casings, to fit around Freddy's, Freddy's stomach hatch, then it seems likely to me that the Glamrock endos probably, like, if they are mimics, which seems incredibly likely, then Mimic can manipulate himself. Which again is just like a Funtime endoskeleton. And to be clear, I am not saying that the Funtimes are mimics. No. What I'm saying is that the mimic that we see is likely an incredibly early test of that concept. Where, like, Afton is seeing, like, can I create something that can mimic voices? Like, it should be possible. Can I create something that can manipulate its size and shape and, like, should be possible? Because, like, you'll notice, like, the mimic, its face gets squeezed by the elevator doors on the way out, and it doesn't seem to struggle too much. It seems more than happy to lose a hand, which could just be because its programming is weird, but, I'm just saying, mimics, there's a lot of evidence the mimic should be able to manipulate himself, just like a Funtime endoskeleton. So I think the mimic is likely to have been his prototype for whatever the Funtimes are, right? Like a very early version of that. Which would then make sense, because it's possible then that the mimic may have seen the events, like, may have just seen Afton killing kids, for one, in brutal ways to experiment with Agony or Remnant, if the animatronics were kidnapping people. But two, and even more interestingly, it also probably saw the scooping of Michael Afton, which I bring up because in Ruin, it's specifically noted that, like, when Cassie, in the Brazil ending, the mimic, through the voice of Gregory, says, "Cassie, it's okay, I found somewhere to hide," which the implication would be that Mimic, like, is using her as a suit, which is not only incredibly interesting, especially because Cassie, in theory, will be able to possess her own body like Michael did. In theory. Especially because the Mimic will be inside it, so she'll probably possess the Mimic in her body. But we know that, like, you possess your body if you possess the animatronic, so, like, in a kind of reverse, like, a bit like a reverse spring lock, where, like, oh, my body is infused into the machine, it'll be like, oh no, the machine is infused into my body, and I've possessed that, so I possess my body. Kind of thing. But the point is, the fact that it goes inside of her, probably, and uses her as, like, a skin suit, feels like it definitely saw the events that happened in Sister Location, and, like, that's when it learned, oh, I need to squeeze inside someone's body and use it to get out of here. Which would further the idea that, like, Mimic was built by Afton, and Afton built Mexis, and, like, this is the Sister Location, like, again, that was the Scooper, and that feels very likely to me. Although it'd be interesting then, because the Springlock suit would have been moved. Because in Sister Location we see the Springlock suit, it's in the scooping room, it sees Ballora get scooped. And in Ruin, there's just giant canisters of gas there. Which would mean the Springlock suit's around, and Mimic doesn't get into a Springlock suit, it gets into a felt costume from Fredbear's. So, that would provide a very interesting question of where the hell is the Springlock suit gone? And will we see it in the future? Or is it just an oversight? Or maybe it was never there and that was just the game dev or Nightmare Gas or something like that. Anyway, point is going back to this, Mimic was likely there and likely being used as a prototype. So now Afton's created this thing that mimics behaviour, and he's created this thing that mimics voices. So I'm wondering if everything we see Psychic Fredbear do, like, it clearly has robotics, right? Because it can move around, and it's attached to the cameras, and it has some amount of walkie-talkie technology. Like, it clearly is technologically inclined. But I'm wondering if maybe Afton isn't the one talking to his kid. If maybe he's not using the mimic. Because, like, and then that would provide an interesting parallel to story, where, like, he hasn't literally given Crying Child the mimic to copy all his behaviours and play with him. But what he's done is, like, copied his own voice into the Fredbear plush, attached the mimic chip inside of it, which is even interesting because, like, maybe Helpy has a mimic chip. Maybe Helpy has strong associations with the mimic, which gives the mimic a strong association with tiny little companion bears that act as the protagonist's companion in the non-night sections. So, I think it's two very weird connections that the mimic does have towards Crying Child. And then, so I'm wondering if, like, everything the mimic is saying as the Fredbear plush isn't, like, learned. It's like, it watches Crying Child, and it learns how William speaks to him, and it learns what Crying Child, like, is like, and what he thinks and what he believes, and then it says it back to him as a way of keeping his kid companion, right? Like, giving his kid a companion. And then his kid dies, and then, sure enough, like, what do we see but the Fredbear plush in the sister location bunker, just there. Like, not being used anymore, just left on the side. And obviously then that would explain the two different colours, which was probably never intentional, but, like, it does provide all new context, right? Where, like, if the whole game it's the mimic speaking, the mimic speaking, the mimic speaking, and suddenly you get Afton, and he comes in and he goes over the radio, and it's him talking, like, I will put you back together, that could work. And that would then provide Mimic a lot more of an interesting connection to the old story. And will provide a reason for it to have come into the new story, especially if Gregory is a robot Crying Child. Right, because then that provides that would even explain Mimic's interest in Gregory. Even when Cassie finds him out, even as he's about to kill Cassie, or I guess they're about to kill Cassie, because the Mimic isn't sentient, so it shouldn't have a gender, right? Right as it's about to kill Cassie, it's still going, I am Gregory. It's still latching onto Gregory. It's still using Gregory's voice. Keep in mind, the Mimic isn't intelligent. It shouldn't, know Cassie is Gregory's friend. It shouldn't immediately know that Cassie is... I guess maybe it has some connection to the security cameras, or maybe Mimic 1 has, informed it that the most probable success will be using Gregory. But I just find that very interesting. And yes, in a previous video, I've just listed off I have it written down, all the evidence that Gregory is a robot Crying Child, and I'll probably make a video where I just list all of that out. Because I think that there's one too many coincidences, well, for 2-3 too many coincidences for me to just overlook that theory. Anyway, so I do think there's a chance between, the connections to the dislocation bunker, the connections to tiny companion bears, the weird connections to Crying Child through Gregory, the weird, I think it is quite possible that the Mimic 1 program was put inside of Fredbear as a way to entertain Crying Child and keeping companioned. It doesn't seem like Afton's thing to constantly be coming over a radio and talking to his kid, but it does seem like a very Afton thing to just have a robot do it for him. Anyway, on to the final meat and potatoes, right? Is Crying Child Glitchtrap? Well, let's go over the evidence for Afton first. The evidence for Afton is just common sense. It recreates Afton crimes. Afton is the big villain. Purple is goddamn everywhere with this guy. It's a bunny. It's I always come back. It's just constant. It makes sense to be Afton, and I do think there's I do think that makes sense, and that there is more evidence for it being William. But there is compelling evidence that it's Crying Child. Like, I flip back and forth on if I don't believe this and it's just a theory I want to put out there, or if, like, it's really compelling, maybe I do believe it a bit. You know? I believe it enough to put it out there, right? Is Crying Child Glitchtrap? It's quite possible. First off, let's get the off stuff. The drool and tears. Tears in the soup. As I said earlier, right, like, it's a very childlike way of crying where, like, you're drooling from the mouth, right? Like, that's something that tends to go away with crying as an adult. And something that doesn't really make sense for William, who, like, I'm not going to call a sociopath, but, like, it doesn't seem like he'd be crying to have come back. But crying child? Yes, suddenly the tears and the drool, it all makes sense, so that's already a big connection. And then there's the numerous references to Full Festive 83 and the Dreadbear DLC. Like, constant 83, 83, like Dreadbear being a version of Fredbear. Like, even, like, Jacko Foxy, or whatever his name, I think he's Grim Foxy, technically, but he's basically Jacko Foxy. Like, a Jack-O-Lantern version of Foxy who lines up with the Jacko animatronics who were nightmares, and I get that that's... Like, at this point, it's generally agreed that Michael was probably the one seeing the nightmares, but my working theory, and I'm just going to go through it very quickly, my theory is that after Crying Child's death, William created marionettes on strings. They're the In Your Dreams animatronics from Security Breach, right? They were on strings, he was using nightmare gas or illusion discs. He manages to capture Agony inside of illusion discs, he puts them on top of some robotic endoskeletons, like the Agony is Crying Child's agony and sadness and fear and all of that. They get put in the illusion disc, and then, like, through this, Crying Child's soul is able to attach to all of the various nightmares. That's why there are things like an IV coming in, and flowers, and pill bottles, and, like, all this supernatural stuff happens. Like, the animatronics seem to be able to teleport, which doesn't feel like a Nightmare Gas style thing. Like, to me, that's Crying Child. Like, I don't think the Crying Child literally had the nightmares and then they were put onto Michael in an experiment. I think it's more like Crying Child had more generic, like, chased by this animatronic style nightmares. Freddy Krueger, Foxy nightmares. But then Crying Child created the gameplay of FNAF 4, and he's the soul in charge of it all, and he's the one possessing the nightmares. And I'll see my FNAF 4 theory, but, like, that's my general belief right now. Point is, Crying Child does have a connection to the Jacko animatronics. So, like, the Jacko animatronics appearing in the Dreadbear DLC, yeah, that's interesting. And then there's the big one. When you get all 3 clown posters and you throw all 3 darts, the barn goes into rave mode with the message, "It's me." Who's me? That's clearly a Golden Freddy line. And, like, this is the same barn. And, like, this is the kicker. It's the same barn where you get the Vanny mask in the Dreadbear DLC. Same barn. So, Vanny, it's me. So, like, Vanny is possessed by Glitchtrap, or influenced by Glitchtrap, a servant of Glitch. Like, whatever the connection is, and it kind of seems like the connection changed between Help Wanted and Security Breach. Like, it was kind of retconned what they're... Like, seems like originally it was going to be mentor-mentee relationship, and then just went to, now Glitchtrap's possessing her, which is so much less interesting of a concept, but whatever. Like, based on the way they were talking. So, like, you have the Vanny mask, something representative of, or something that can at least communicate with Glitchtrap. And in that same barn, you have the message, "It's me." For a rabbit costume, with tears and drool. Like, it's and, like, numerous references to 83, numerous references to the Nightmare animatronics in the form of, you know, Dreadbear and Jackos and, like, trick-or-treating, right? Even, like, if you look at the games of the Dreadbear DLC, you've got trick-or-treating. Like, it... Where, like, in fact, another kicker The trick or treat minigame involves putting on masks. The same masks that were used to torment Crying Child. Like, it's actually kind of wild. Like, there are so many weird connections between Crying Child. Oh, I forgot to mention one for William, actually, and that was the little puppet. The Potter Puppet Pals that comes out with there's a puppet that looks just like Glitchtrap. Glitchtrap has a puppet on his hand, and that links to the FNAF 6 poster with the Afton family in quotations. But the William stand-in is holding a puppet that looks just like him, which is people believe represents Michael, and so it's interesting then that Glitchtrap has a puppet of, himself in a very similar manner. But even a small puppet-esque thing is that not just what his plushies are? Crying Child's plushies. Plus, the puppet is probably just an interesting choice, and I believe the artist of that particular poster has gone on record to say it's not supposed to represent the Afton family, so it's not necessary. There's tons of evidence it's William. Also, tons of evidence that it's Cassidy. Cassidy Afton, that is. It's so wild. If this is all coincidence, it's wild and almost J-Top went on record to say do we know things? And is that just him trying to frustrate the whole theory base, and we've got to now go through everything and see if we actually know what it is. We've got to reaffirm the things we know. And, have we made some major assumptions? Or is he talking about Glitchtrap? Is he saying, oh, we know Glitchtrap is the Mimic, or, oh, we know Glitchtrap is William? There are two big camps, and they could just both be wrong? Maybe that's what he's talking about. He's like, oh, do you know it's Mimic? Do you know it's William? Because it ain't. It's Crying Child. Get a load of these guys. They're so off base. They haven't picked up. I mean, what? He said to John, he said, yeah, I've put out details out there that nobody's picked up on, and I was surprised no one picked up on. What if this is those details? What if the details are the 83 and the It's Me and the tears that just all point towards Crying Child and just no one's bothered with it? He's Crying Child, isn't he? Glitchtrap is Crying Child. Oh. The only really big question with Crying Child being Glitchtrap is, what about Burn Trap? I mean, I pretty clearly confirmed they're the same. So, and that Burn Trap is powering up Glitchtrap. So how would that work? Well, it's actually quite easily explained, all things considered. You see, in Ultimate Custom Night, there are 6 spirits, potentially, 5 or 6, seeming to be around. Also, you've got Charlie speaking through the puppet and possibly Lefty. You've got William, obviously he's the one being tortured. You've got Michael as the vengeful spirit. You've got, Michael Brooks as the one you should not have killed. Right, so you've got the one you should not have killed, the vengeful spirit. And then you have Old Man Consequences. If he's a spirit, is he an embodiment of fate? Is he God? I mean, it's really hard to say. But finally, you've got the Death Coin Easter egg on Golden Freddy, where you get the Fredbear jump scare, and Fredbear has the silver eyes, and the only person to ever possess Fredbear, which represents possession, and the only person to ever possess Fredbear is Crying Child. So could that potentially imply Crying Child is somewhere in Ultimate Custom Night, but not an active participant, but you can summon him with the Death Coin. As a Death Coin Easter egg, I feel like it should be substantial, right? So if Crying Child is here, then he could just be Burn Trap, right? William's being held down by Michael Afton, Michael Brooks, Charlie's here doing something or other, and even if you believe in Raito's theory that FNAF World is Charlie freeing Crying Child, a bit on the fence about it, but that's because to be fair, I haven't watched it, I don't think. But in that case, even that would imply if Charlie's here and she's doing FNAF World, then these places are probably connected in some way. So if Crying Child is in FNAF World, then maybe he's also in Ultimate Custom Night. Like, there's enough connective tissue that it's not a stretch to say that Crying Child is here. And so if Crying Child is not, however, an active participant of Ultimate Custom Night, like Charlie, Michael, William, they're all active participants, and then Crying Child, he can be summoned, but he's not really doing anything. Maybe that's because instead he's the one who's now taken charge of this body. Like, he is the one possessing Burn Trap, and that's why he can power up Glitchtrap, would be my explanation to that. Again, do I, really, really think and really stand by this theory? No. But also, It's Me is very explicit. Very explicit. I would need an explanation for that to completely let go of this theory. Is it perfect? No. But, I would need another explanation to fully be okay, yeah, no, that theory is not likely at all. I think this theory has a decent chance, and right now I do think it's more compelling than the Mimic being Glitchtrap. Both from a story perspective and from the perspective of evidence. To me, it feels more likely that, Crying Child is more likely than Mimic. William is probably more likely, or, at least on par with Crying Child. And it really depends on, what piece of evidence you really choose to put emphasis on. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.